we rolling?
Like I said, you're the first, so there's a lot of there's a lot of tricks.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would say your name and anything you want to reflect on the festival or the theme being home and away, what you've chosen here.
I'm Steve Martin.
Oh, I'm sorry, and you can speak to me.
Okay. I'm Steve Martin, and I'm here because I want to be on the web. And this is one of the ways I could get on the web. And so I'm speaking here tonight, and the theme is home and away, which I didn't really pay attention to. I just figured out what I wanted to read and then sort of figured out if it would fit or not in some way. And but I don't even really know what home and away means when I think about it. But I'm happy to help pin. And then Saturday.
Sorry, one moment. Okay.
And then on Saturday, I'm doing a panel with some very good people. Susan Orleans, I think her name is Orleans. Susan Orleans.
I pronounce it both ways.
Yeah. I'm sure however it's pronounced, she pronounces it wrong, and I'm actually probably more correct.
Just wait for the moderators.
Yeah, and then on adaptation, which I've done a couple of things of, and that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay, and Penn, you said you're interested in supporting Penn.
Yes, actually, Salman Rushdie got me into it, and I think one day he's going to explain to me what it is, and I just cannot wait to find out. But I love to support it.
Thanks very much. I look forward to tonight and the other events.
Not my native language. I'll do my best for you.
I saw you give an interview today in front of Deutsches Haus.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly that was not English.
Is that Caro?
This isn't Carol. This is Ellen. Ellen
Oh,
from the
Ellen.
French Publishers Agency.
Oh, oui.
Asking everyone to say their name and something about why this festival is significant, and maybe if you wanted to speak about the theme for tonight.
I think that this festival is very significant for a writer like me, coming from the world, what they call the third world, because it's maybe the only way to meet the other writer in order to discuss the matter of our creation. And then I think also the voices coming from the world are now very important in our literature, because we are in a kind of word literature nowadays. So I'm glad and pleased to see that I can meet like Salman Rushdie, Nadine Gordimer, Daniela Ferrier, or meet a lot of writers I couldn't have met without this festival.
And that they can meet you, I'm sure.
Yes, they can meet me, but it's not that important.
So the theme as being someone who doesn't live in New York ties in perhaps with the motivation for being here, that there's home and away. Did you want to say something about that theme?
Can you say it again?
Oh, well, just how the theme relates to your experience as being a writer who doesn't live in New York.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very important. A lot of African writers are considered like African in exile. So he used to deal with the fact that he's living abroad and his native country is far from him. But it's not a big problem, because he uses that situation for his writing, and I need to see the other countries in order to feed my inspiration. That's very important. At the same time, in order to write very well, you have to be rooted and you have to see what is happening abroad. Yes.
Very true. That sums it all up. Thanks very much.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Beowulf over here. Okay, so we'll do this over here. So, deep breath. And if you could, and this will just be for the Penn website, so it's an informal kind of thing. And this is our photographer who might be taking a picture. You can.
Question before the interview. I thought I was interrupting you.
Oh no, we're just starting, and in a second we'll be just finishing. If you could tell us your name and your thoughts on the importance of the pen and the importance of the festival, perhaps.
Sorry. No, I'm delighted to be here on behalf of Ben. Does this work?
This is working.
Oh,
Yes.
oh good. It's and it's something that's an honor for a writer in any case, coming from on the other side of the world, a very different landscape. I think one's always conscious of the fact that writers, you don't think of it so much here, but writers inevitably fall into much bigger debates when they come from another part of the world. You're not protected in the same way. You think you're writing, you're just writing, you're irresponsible, you're a writer, and you fall into political debates immediately. And these issues of, the theme is home, but issues of immigration, exile, of being a refugee, being an immigrant, all this vocabulary overlaps. It's something that's common to all of us. And it's not just a Western issue, which is what we think about. Immigration and exile is a Western issue. It's not true at all. I mean, India has the same parallel issues going on at the same time. Immigration, exile, refugees coming into India, and you see a real parallel debate. So I hope this festival, examines that.
All those issues.
Examines the fact that that it's not purely a Western issue, that we're all dealing with the same conversation across borders. It's an important realization not to look at immigration in this blinkered way that we do here. Maybe it's necessary for practical reasons. I mean, it has to be local to some degree, but the fact that it's not being considered in a wider way, I think, is part of the problem. And you see Western nations horrified at the problems within immigrant communities, the anger within immigrant communities. It begins to make more sense when you look at the world in a wider way.
That was perfect. That was exactly. Great. Thank you.
Yes, I'm maybe the only one who is not prepared to answer about Home in the Wave. I never wrote about it.
Oh.
So I'll just have to figure out.
Okay. Well, maybe you'd like to say something about the festival. I think this is your first year participating.
No, I don't think so. I was here many years ago.
Oh yes, but as for the Penn World Voices Festival, which started 3 years ago, you've been.
I haven't been at that kind of event, but there were lots of pen events that I visited
So
when I lived here.
Right.
I used to live here for 10 years.
Yes, I saw you
Yeah.
reading back then.
Yeah. And so now I'm back in Moscow and rarely participate in an event of the kind.
So why participate in this one?
Oh, why not? Why not? I mean, they invited me, and it's always pleasant to meet fellow writers from time to time. I rarely do that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Okay. So there must be, you must enjoy some of the writers that you know who are also going to be here this week.
Well, yes, hope so.
What are you going to read tonight, if I may?
A chapter from my novel. It takes place in imaginary place, the novel. So it's imaginary home. And with great difficulty I found something about home as such.
Yeah. So, are you aware? Would you be able to speak about Penn's activities in Russia right now?
No, I don't participate in them. I'm a member, but I don't participate in them.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine.
It's okay.
This is Beowulf, a Regazo Festival photographer. We're very pleased to have you at the festival this year, and I wonder if you could just say something about Penn, about the festival, why you're participating. Would that be all right?
Well, I live in London. I have something to do with the English pen. But here, in the States, the first time I have this invitation from the American Pen Center. And really, when I came here just to enter the place, I saw the people there queuing to enter. Most of them young people, and the night. So there is really, it is a cultural feast, a real cultural event here. Yeah.
And have you been following Pen's work in Iraq?
Well, you know, with the English pen, I am in the advisory committee of the English pen review. That's it. Yeah. So I have certain relation with the pen in a way or another.
Perhaps it will be greater this week.
Yeah, that's something different. You know, the English pen is not as active as the American Pen Center.
Yes. Anything else you'd like to say on the theme of home and away?
Yes, because this evening it's about home and beyond. So I will read something with my limit of 8 minutes. That's all right. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Kara's speech.
I have my walkie-talkie.
Yeah, go ahead. You trying to get attention?
We will read together. All the way.
Excuse me.
Hello. Carol.
Well,
Carol Llewellyn.
hi
Silence,
everybody.
everybody.
Hi everybody. I just wanted to, well actually Salman is going to really explain what the proceedings are tonight. But just to let you know that we have a full house, which is 1,500 people, which is just wonderful, so thank you all. You all, I think there's a running order which you might have, but Salman will go through that again, and I'll hand to you.
All right, have you got the things up there about left and right?
Yes.
You have.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
You can explain
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, folks. Come on, 2 minutes, and then you can gossip. It's very simple. I go out there and I say it's about this. Thank you for coming. Blah blah. Switch off your cell phones. And I tell everybody, when you go out, say who you are. Say whatever. Introduce yourself. If you want to say something about what you're reading, say that. Read what you're reading. Get off. And that's it. And also, there's a left side, right side. You know, we come on from alternate sides of the stage, and we will tell you which line you're in. Tia's writing this book. I know it's difficult, but you can grasp this. You can grasp this. So that's it. And at the end of it, we all come off. Then they go out there and they put up. I know some of you have to leave early, which is fine. But for those who can stay, they will put up the tables and we can go out there and sign books for a little bit. And that makes publishers happy.
Yep.
And it won't take that long because actually people I've discovered, don't come to this event to buy books. They come to listen. You know, so they're not coming with heaps of books, but there will be some. So we'll go out there again and do that, and then we'll go to the hotel and have a lot to drink. So that's it. All you have to do is find out. You'll tell them, or who will tell them, who is on the left and who's on the right.
Basically, yeah, I mean, starting with Salman.
This is Andrea, who is the only begetter, etc.
Starting with Salman, who's going to come up on stage left. We're going to alternate. So Salman is stage left. Steve is going to be stage right. Pia, stage left. Don, stage right, and so on and so forth. So it's very simple.
Tatyana left, Saadi right, Kiran left, Alain right.
I'll tell her down.
I don't think you should be making fun of.
Yeah, I'm upstairs working signing. I probably won't have time to hang out. But I'll talk to you tomorrow.
You want to?
Thanks.
Hello, it's you now.
These are some rare items.
It's very rare.
Yes. Not a problem. I'll try not to lose your place. Who's it for?
Of course, he lives here now. Somewhere in this country.
And that I am able to listen to you. And so even if you just write a little
Tatyana Tolstaya.
wanted to ask about her. You know what? Maybe we should. Hello, Sunny. How are you?
All right. Why do you want to do that after a day of programs? I said, why do you want to do that after a day of programs?
I wasn't Jack and everything that lady.
Do the honor of putting your signature on there too. Use this pen because that's the sharp signature. And figure in here, left to right, it's inside the yellow pepper.
My other eyeballs are.
Who is it for?
Make it easier. Rachel, like that.
Rachel with an A-E-L,
Yes.
Rachel. Okay. And Terry hasn't defaced this already, no?
No.
It's a virgin book.
Do you mind saying it's a long topic? Anywhere.
Is it because you don't like the picture on the back?
No, it's just because Terry, if you ever get Terry, he will do the punchline down there.
Oh, okay.
And it's, well, I don't know if it's funny, but we've been doing it for years.
Okay.
And then he does burn this book on. It's not that bad a photo.
No, I like the photo.
I was younger then.
I like the photo.
And Terry had black in his beard. We're in Kensal Green Cemetery.
Is that where that is?
That is.
It's
Kensal
excellent.
Green, one of the
I
great
like the
cemeteries
photo.
of London.
Thank you so much.
You are so
Have a
welcome.
lovely evening.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi. This is incredible.
Is that right? Oh, I'm impressed. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to hear that.
I'm very thrilled to hear.
Favor to ask, and I understand if you don't want to do it. Sung my offer first.
I don't see why not.
Okay. Well, this actually, I'm running out of space, so you have to use the Sharpie. Can you do in there, left to right? Is there enough room?
In here?
Yes, please.
I'll see Magda. Magda has your contact.
God, you collected quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to find them. They might
All
come
visions on here.
I don't know if I did. So whoever's available first. Okay. You could step down if you're ready. Yes.
How is Neil's line? How is Neil's line? Neil Gaiman's line?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, wow. We're going to have so much fun.
Hello. Hi. Hi. Hello, good evening. Another full house. It's getting to be kind of a habit. You know, all of us back there wondering why the hell you show up to listen to us, but I'm glad that you know. Seems weird to us. But thank you, truthfully, from everybody at Penn. It's been very exciting for us to see how this festival has established itself in the life of New York City and how it's grown year on year. And we owe that to you, we owe that to all of you who come and support it and tell your friends. And really, it's very exciting to see that the audience is so enthusiastic, so big, and actually, I have to say, so young. Because it means maybe the novel, was that a hiss from an old person? You know, I feel your pain. Anyway, thank you, and tell your friends, and just remember that this is by no means, this is a big thing, but actually, in my experience of the Penn festivals, quite often the best events are small events where just two interesting writers are talking to each other, so don't miss out on those. And there's 150 writers here this week. There's another, 60 events between now and Sunday night. And please do try and make it if you can, and if not, send somebody else along. What else to say? Please turn off your cell phones. No matter how often you say this, there's always somebody who doesn't do it. So please, you in particular, sir, the one who doesn't turn off your cell phone, inconsiderate cell phone man, please, please turn off your cell phone. The only thing I'm going to say by way of introduction is that it seems to me that this subject, the subject of this year, the subject of home, writing home, the subject of home and away, is perhaps, it's always been a big subject for writers. For many writers, place has always been central to the way in which they see the world. But I think at the moment, in this age of ours, it's more apposite than ever, because the idea of home has, in this age of displacement and mass migration and mass refugees phenomena, and the way in which people have become suspicious of the other within ourselves, and the way in which we ourselves, when we travel elsewhere, are seen as being other and suspect. The whole idea of home, what is your home? How does a place become your home? What is the meaning of the word, of the term, in the age in which we live? I think it's more than usually apposite, as I say, in this age of migration. And we have an amazing list of writers for you tonight, and I'm going to get off stage and let them start. So thank you very much, and again, sir, turn off your cell phone.
Thank you very much. I'm Steve Martin, and let me just say that it's a great honor for me to be here among these great writers, and it's an incredible disgrace that they are here with me. I'm going to read from an unpublished book that will be published in December. It's called Born Standing Up, and it's a memoir of my career as a stand-up comedian. On a humid Monday night in the summer of 1965, after finding an $8 hotel room in the then economically friendly city of San Francisco, I lugged my banjo and black hardshell prop case 10 sweaty blocks uphill to the Coffee and Confusion, where I had signed up to play for free. The club was tiny and makeshift, decorated with chairs, tables, a couple of bare light bulbs, and nothing else. I had romanticized San Francisco as an exotic destination, away from friends and family and toward mystery and adventure. So I often drove my 20-year-old self up from Los Angeles to audition my fledgling comedy act at a club or to play banjo on the street for tips. I would either sleep in my VW van, camp out in Golden Gate Park, pay for a cheap hotel, or snag a free room in a Haight-Ashbury Victorian crash pad by making an instant friend. At this point, my act was a catch-all, cobbled together from the desperate universes of juggling, comedy, banjo playing, weird bits I'd written in college, and magic tricks. I was strictly Monday night quality, the night when, traditionally, anyone could get up to perform. All we entertainers knew Mondays were really audition nights for the club. I walked past Broadway in Columbus, where Lawrence Ferlinghetti's ramshackle City Lights books was jam-packed with thin, small-press publications offering way-out poetry and reissues of long-ago banned erotic novels. Around the corner on Broadway was Mike's Pool Hall, where bikers and hippies first laid eyes on each other, unsure whether they should beat each other up or just smoke pot and forget about it. Steps away was the Hungry Eye, a nightclub that had launched 1,000 careers, including those of the Smothers Brothers, the Kingston's Trio, and Lenny Bruce, but I had to trudge on by. Just up Columbus, I passed the Condor, the first of a sudden explosion of topless clubs, where Carol Doda, in a newfangled bathing suit that exposed her recently inflated basketball breasts, descended from the ceiling on a grand piano that was painted virginal white. This cultural melange and the growing presence of drugs made the crowded streets of North Beach simmer with toxic vitality. The Coffee and Confusion was on nearby Grant Avenue, a street dotted with used clothing stores and incense shops. I nervously entered the club, and Ivan Ultz, the showrunner, put me on the lineup. I lingered at the back, waiting for my turn, and surveyed the audience of about 15 people. They were arrayed in patchwork jeans with tie-dyed tops, and the room was thick with an illegal aroma. In the audience was a street poet, dressed in rags and bearded like a yeti, who had a plastic machine gun that shot ping-pong balls, which he unloaded on performers he didn't like. I was still untouched by the rapidly changing fashion scene. My short hair and conservative clothes weren't going to help me with this crowd. Ivan introduced me. My opening line, "Hello, I'm Steve Martin, and I'll be out here in a minute," was met with one lone chuckle. I struggled through the first few minutes, keeping a wary eye on Mr. Ping Pong Ball, and filled in the dead air with some banjo tunes that went just okay. I could see Ivan standing nearby, concerned. I began to strum the banjo, singing a song that I told the audience my grandmother had taught me. Be courteous, kind, and forgiving. Be gentle and peaceful each day. Be warm and human and grateful, and have a good thing to say. Be thoughtful and trustful and childlike. Be witty and happy and wise. Be honest and love all your neighbors. Be obsequious, purple, and clairvoyant. Be pompous, obese, and eat cactus. Be dull and boring and omnipresent. Criticize things you don't know about. Be oblong and have your knees removed. And then I said, now everyone. And I repeated the entire thing, adding in, ladies only, never make love to Bigfoot. Men only, hello, my name is Bigfoot. Not many people sang along. I thought I was dead, but I wasn't. And now I announced the napkin trick. And I'll do it for you. Haven't done that in years. I bowed deeply, as though what I had just done was unique in the history of show business. No ping pong balls came my way, only a nice, curious laugh that perked up the rest of my show and seemed to make the audience think that what they were seeing might be okay. I got word from the club's owner, Sylvia Fennell, that the Coffee and Confusion would like to try me for a week as an opening act. Sylvia was a tough but likable New Yorker who had moved west to enter the nightclub business and whose width, height, and depth were the same measurement. She didn't know much about show business, having once told a ventriloquist to move the dummy closer to the microphone. She was, however, savvy about the bottom line, evidenced by a sign in the kitchen that said, anyone giving money to Janis Joplin before her last set is fired. And if they are a customer, they're 86th. Later, I found out the main reason I was hired was because I was a member of the musicians union, which I joined only because I thought I had to be in at least one performers union, and the musicians was the cheapest. Sylvia had been told that if she didn't hire a union worker pronto, the place would be shut down. The night of my first appearance, Gaylord the Bartender, the separate syllables of his name correctly described his sexual orientation and his demeanor, came to me and said it was time to start. But, I said, as I waved my hand to indicate the stone-empty club, there's nobody here. He pointed to the large window that looked onto the sidewalk and explained that my job was to be on stage so passers-by could see a show going on and be lured in. I said, I wasn't a singer, I was a comedian, and doing comedy for absolutely no one posed a problem. So, he implied. Dave Archer, the amiable doorman, seconded him, telling me that this was the way the evening always began. So I went on stage and started talking to no one. The first couple who walked through the door did a whiplash scan of the vacant room and immediately left. But more than a few came in, looked around, saw nobody, shrugged an oh well, and sat down, especially after Dave offered them a free coffee. One night I started a serious banjo tune, and sensing the audience's boredom, stopped and said, I like to keep the laughs rolling even while I'm playing. I reached down to my prop table and put on my arrow through the head, purchased as an afterthought at a Hollywood Boulevard magic store, with no idea of how I was going to use it, and finished the song. Then I forgot to take it off. Every earnest thing I said was contradicted and deflated by this silly novelty. Sylvia Fennell's advice about the arrow, which was to become my most famous prop, was lose it. I was contracted to be on stage for 25 minutes. I had a solid 10 minutes, and the rest of my material was highly unreliable. If I got some laughs, I could almost make it, but if the audience was dead, my 25-minute show would shrink to about 12. Afraid of falling short, I ad-libbed, wandered around the audience, talked to patrons, joked with waitresses, and took note of anything unusual that was happening in the crowd and addressed it for laughs in hope of keeping my written material in reserve so I could fill my time quota. The format stuck. Years later, it was this pastiche element that made my performances seem unstructured and modern. That week at the Coffee and Confusion, something started to make sense. My act, having begun 3 years earlier as a conventional attempt to enter regular show business, was becoming a parody of comedy. I was an entertainer who was playing an entertainer, a not-so-good one, and this embryonic notion drove me to work on other material in that vein. After my last show on Sunday, I walked a few doors up to the Coffee Gallery, another Grant Avenue folk club, and sat alone in an empty showroom. On the jukebox was the haunting voice of Frank Sinatra singing, "When I was 17, it was a very good year." Each successive stanza advanced the narrator by a decade, causing me to reflect on something I could not possibly reflect on, my future. The next song was the Beatles' Norwegian Wood, and its modal tones underscored the moody darkness. I felt an internal stillness, much like the moment of silence a performer seeks before he goes on stage. I know now why this memory has stuck with me so vividly. My ties to home were broken. I had a new group of friends. I was loose and independent. I had my first job where I slept in a hotel at night instead of my own bed. I was about to start my life.
My name is Pia Tafdrup. I come from Denmark, and I'm very happy to have this invitation. The idea of home has very much to do with our parents and language. So tonight I read about my mother and father. The first poem is about conception. It's called Kernel. I was a night in August on the other side of the planet's eyes. I was a hand that gripped and held fast. I was an avalanche, a blood-black wall on fire. I was a stabbing passage in my mother's heart, where she had to decide if life was worth living. I was my father's lust, I was forgiveness. I was the pulse in the earth, the deepest veins. I was the dew in the grass one raw cold morning. I was flower and nectar scent. I was a dripping sweetish taste of the apple with bitter cornelian red peel, a kernel that without sinking rode on the water and was washed ashore on a northern coast on the 56th parallel. I was the hidden that was found by a beam of light, seen by an angel's eye, an eye that thought it was lost, where the beach was salt white, the sand light as ash, and the beach forest four steep slopes to reflect itself in the water, echo on echo. I was a raging fever in the blood. I was a membrane that broke the birds that flew. I was the murmur in the space beneath the treetop's doom, a whirring of sounds that led weightlessly in, where paths are erased and there is no way back, into the magnetic field of the hidden, into the zone of sucking darkness from which all the alphabet's letters spring, out into the light, out into the silence, to strike root in infinite present, where the shadows dwell and are not assimilated. Then I read a poem about my mother who taught me the alphabet. It's called My Mother's Hand. Bathing in a drop's quiet light, I remember how I came into being. A pencil stuck in my hand, my mother's cool hand around mine. It was warm, and then we rode in and out between coral reefs, an undersea alphabet of arches and apexes, of snail shell spirals, of starfish points, of gesticulating octopus arms, of cave walls and rock formations, letters that vibrated and found their way dizzy over the white, words like flat fish that flapped and dug themselves into the sand, or swaying sea anemones with hundreds of threads in quiet motion at the same time. Sentences like streams of fish that grew fins and rose, grew wings and moved in a rhythm, throbbing like my blood that blindly beat stars against the heart's night sky. When I saw that her hand had let mine go, that I had long ago written myself out of her grasp. Then I will read a poem about my father from the latest collection, Tarkovsky's Horses. First, I read it in Danish. Godnat. Min far bliver iført natskjorte. Så længe jeg var barn, dryssede han stjernestøv og månegrus ned i mine øjne. Så længe jeg var barn, talte jeg som et barn, tænkte jeg som et barn, dømte jeg som et barn. Hver godnathistorie jeg fik, havde sin egen farve. Min far fortalte, så en blind under mørkets klokke ville kunne se en regnbue. Jeg sov og drømte det umulige langt borte fra verdens angst. Jeg vender mig om, vender mig mod ham, ser i min fars øjne stjernestøv og månegrus. Nu kommer natten, den lange nat. Mælkeveje og morfin suser gennem hans krop med lysets tyngde af smertes ophør. And the same, and the last one in English. It's called Good Night. My father is being dressed in a nightshirt. When I was a child, he sprinkled stardust and moon gravel down on my eyes. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. Every good night story I received had its own color. My father told them so a blind man under darkness spell would be able to see a rainbow. I slept and dreamt the impossible, far away from the world's anxiety. I turn around, turn towards him, see in my father's eyes stardust and moon gravel. Now the night is coming, the long night. Milky ways of morphine murmur through his body with the light's heaviness of pain's cessation. Thank you.
Don DeLillo reading from a new novel, Falling Man. The first cop told him to go to the checkpoint 1 block east of here, and he did this. And there were military police and troops in Humvees, and a convoy of dump trucks and sanitation sweepers moving south through the parted sawhorse barriers. He showed proof of address with picture ID, and the second cop told him to go to the next checkpoint east of here. And he did this and saw a chain-link barrier stretching down the middle of Broadway, patrolled by troops in gas masks. He told the cop at the checkpoint that he had a cat to feed, and if it died, his child would be devastated. And the man was sympathetic, but told him to try the next checkpoint. There were fire rescue cars and ambulances. There were state police cruisers, flatbed trucks, vehicles with cherry pickers, all moving through the barricades into the shroud of sand and ash. He showed the next cop his proof of address and picture ID and told him there were cats he had to feed, 3 of them, and if they died, his children would be devastated. And he showed the splint on his left arm. He had to move out of the way when a drove of enormous bulldozers and backhoes moved through the parted barricades, making the sound of hell machines at endless revving pitch. He started over again with a cop and showed his wrist splint and said he needed only 15 minutes in the apartment to feed the cats, and then he'd go back to the hotel and reassure the children. The cop said, okay, but if you're stopped down there, be sure to tell him you went through the Broadway checkpoint, not this one. He worked his way through the frozen zone, south and west, passing through smaller checkpoints and detouring around others. There was a guard troop in battle jackets and sidearms, and now and then he saw a figure in a dust mask, man or woman, half surreptitious, the only other civilians. The streets and cars were surfaced in ash, and there were garbage bags stacked high at curbstones and against the sides of buildings. He walked slowly, watching for something he could not identify. Everything was gray. It was limp and failed. Storefronts behind corrugated steel shutters, a city somewhere else under permanent siege, and a stink in the air that infiltrated the skin. He stood at the National Rent-a-Fence barrier and looked into the haze, seeing the strands of bent filigree that were the last standing things, a skeletal remnant of the tower where he'd worked for 10 years. The dead were everywhere, in the air, in the rubble on rooftops nearby, in the breezes that carried from the river. They were settled in ash and drizzled on windows all along the streets, in his hair and on his clothes. He realized someone had joined him at the fence, a man in a dust mask who maintained a measured silence, designed to be broken. Look at it, the man said finally. I say to myself, I'm standing here. It's hard to believe being here and seeing it. His words were muffled by the mask. I walked to Brooklyn when it happened, he said. I don't live there. I live way uptown on the west side, but I work down around here. And when it happened, everybody was walking across the bridge to Brooklyn, and I went with them. I walked across the bridge because they were walking across the bridge. The man took out his cell phone and entered a number. I'm standing here, he said, but had to repeat himself because the person he was talking to could not hear him clearly. I'm standing here, he said. Keith headed in the direction of his apartment building. He saw 3 men in hard hats and NYPD windbreakers with search dogs on short leads. 2 Hasidic men stood outside a shop with a broken window. They looked 1,000 years old. When he approached his building, he saw workers in respirators and protective bodysuits scouring the sidewalks with a massive vacuum pump. The front doors were blown in or kicked in. It was not looters, he thought. He thought that people had taken desperate shelter, taken cover wherever they could when the towers came down. The entrance hall reeked of garbage uncollected in the basement. He climbed the 9 flights to his apartment, pausing on floors 3 and 7 to stand at the near end of the long corridors. He stood and listened. The building seemed empty. It felt and sounded empty. When he entered his apartment, he stood a while, just looking around. The windows were scabbed in sand and ash, and there were fragments of paper and one whole sheet trapped in the grime. Everything else was the same as it had been when he walked out the door for work that Tuesday morning. Not that he'd noticed. He'd lived here for a year and a half since the separation, finding a place close to the office, centering his life, content with the narrowest of purviews, that of not noticing. But now he looked. Some light entered between splashes of window grit. He saw the place differently now. Here he was, seen clear, with nothing that mattered to him in these 2.5 rooms, dim and still, in the faint odor of non-occupancy. There was the card table, that was all, with its napped green surface, baize or felt, site of the weekly poker game. It was the one uncomplicated interval of his week, his month, the poker game, the one anticipation that was not marked by the blood-gilt tracings of severed connections, call or fold, felt or baize. This was the last time he would stand here. There were no cats, there were only clothes. He put some things in a suitcase, a few shirts and trousers, and his trekking boots from Switzerland, and to hell with the rest. This and that and the Swiss boots, because the boots mattered, and the poker table mattered, but he wouldn't need the table. 2 players dead, 1 badly injured. A single suitcase, that was all, and his passport, checkbooks, birth certificate, and a few other documents, the state papers of identity. He stood and looked and felt something so lonely he could touch it with his hand. He looked in the refrigerator. Maybe he was thinking of the man who used to live here, and he checked the bottles and cartons for a clue. The paper rustled at the window, and he picked up the suitcase and walked out the door, locking it behind him. He went about 15 paces into the corridor, away from the stairwell, and spoke in a voice slightly above a whisper. He said, "I'm standing here." And then louder, "I'm standing here." In the movie version, someone would be in the building, an emotionally damaged woman or a homeless old man, and there would be dialogue and close-ups. He walked down to the lobby, smelling the garbage come closer with every step he took. The men with the vacuum pump were gone. He heard the drone and grind of heavy machinery at the site, earth-moving equipment, excavators that pounded concrete to dust, and then the sound of a klaxon that signaled danger, possible collapse of a structure nearby. He waited. They all waited, and then the grind began again. He went to the local post office to pick up his undelivered mail, and then walked north toward the barricades, thinking it might be hard to find a taxi at a time when every cab driver in New York was named Muhammad. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tatyana Tolstaya. And I will read a chapter from my novel, Slynx. If not everything is clear, it's because the action takes place 200 years after a big explosion, and Moscow became a small village lost in the woods. Oh, how Benedict envied Nikita Ivanitch. That evening, arriving home after work, all worried, he checked the stove as he always did. As if to spite him, as often happened, the stove has gone out. If he'd gotten home an hour earlier, it might have been all right. A little bit of life might still have warmed the embers. He could have probably gotten down on his knees and turning his head like he was praying, blown and blown till a live flame came out of the grey ashen sticks. Yes, just an hour earlier, it would have been still done. The workday is long, and by the time you get to work and then run home afterwards, it's like on purpose, like someone figured it out so that you couldn't make it in time. The soup, of course, wouldn't be cold yet if it was wrapped in rags the way it ought to be. You can fill your belly, but the taste is sad, twilightish. You are in the dark. There is nothing to light a candle with. You feel sorry for yourself, so sorry. The izba isn't cold yet either. You can hit the hay in your padded coat and hat. But it will start freezing up at night time. Winter will creep up to the thin cracks and the notches. It'll blow under the door, breathe cold up from the ground. By morning, there will be death in the izba and nothing else. No, you can't go that long. You have to go ask the stokers for fire, and you'd better get some little surprises ready for them, Golubchik. Or you can knock on your neighbor family's door and beg if they aren't too mean. Family people have it easier. While the husband works, the wife sits at home, keeps house, watches the stove, makes soup, bakes, sweeps, maybe even spins wool. You can't go on begging like that day after day. The neighbor ladies will lose all patience. They'll smack you on the head with a shaft. Or maybe they'll gone to bed. Maybe they're barking at each other like family folk do. Or fighting, pulling each other's hair out. And here you show up. Could you spare some coals, kind Golubchiks? But Nikita Ivanitch now, he doesn't need a family or a woman or neighbors. His stove could go out 100 times. What does he care? He puffs up and lights it again. That means he can smoke when he wants, in the forest or the fields or wherever. He's got a fire with him. If he wants, he can start a campfire and sit down by the flames, tossing on dry storm-kindling branches, forest garbage, fallen thicket rubbish. He can stare into the live, reddish-yellow, flickering, warm, dancing flame. He doesn't have to ask or bow or scrape or be afraid. Nothing. Freedom. Benedict would like that. Yes, he would. Once again, in the pitch dark, he felt for the pot with the warm soup and fumbled around. Where's the spoon? Who the devil knows? He stuck it somewhere and forgot. Slurp it over the rim again? How much could he take? He wasn't a goat after all. He went out on the porch. Lordy, how dark it was. To the north, to the south, toward the sunset, the sunrise, darkness, darkness without end, without borders, and in that darkness, pieces of gloom, other izbas like logs, like rocks, like black holes in the black blackness, like gaps into nowhere, into the freezing hush, into the night, into oblivion, into death, like a long fall into a well, like what happens to you in dreams. You fall, and there is no bottom, and your heart gets smaller and smaller, more pitiful and tighter. Lordy. And over your head is the sky, also blacker than black, and across the sky, in a pattern, are the bluish spots of the stars, thicker sometimes or weaker. It looks like they're breathing, flickering, like they're suffocating too. They're withering, they want to break away, but they can't. They're pinned fast to the black heavenly roof, nailed tight, can't be moved. Right over Benedict's head, always overhead, wherever you go, the trough and the bow, and the bunch of northern horsetail, and the bright white belly button, and the strewn nail clippings, and dimly, crowded, thickened, in a stripe through the whole night vault, the spindle. They've always been there, as long as you can remember. You are born, you die, you get up, you lie down, you dance at your neighbor's wedding, or in the morning, in the stern raspberry dawn, you wake in fright as though someone hit you with a stick, like you alone remain alive on earth, and the stars are still there, always there, pale, blinking, indistinct, eternal, silent. Behind your back, the isba grows cold. Soup, bed. On the bed, a cloth, a boiled felt blanket left by Benedict's mother, a summer coat to cover his legs, a feather pillow, kind of filthy. There should be a table at the window, a stool at the table. On the table, a candlestick with oil candle and extra candles in the closet, and a half pud of rushed, and at the safe place hidden from thieves, extra felt boots, knitted socks, lapti for spring, a stone knife, a string of dried mushrooms, and a pot with a handle. They were there this morning anyway. Everything you could want, anything, and still something's missing. Something gnaws at you. Is it riches I covet, or freedom, or I'm scared of death? Where is it I want to go? Or have I gotten too big for my britches, reached the heights of free thinking, fancy myself a Murza or some ruler, who knows what, or a giant, magical, all-powerful, the most important of all, who tramples golubchiks, dwells in a terem, squeezing his hands, shaking his head. Think how Fyodor Kuzmich, glory be, walked into the mudroom and everyone fell on their knees. Think how Nikita Ivanovich roared fire. That old man isn't afraid of anything. He doesn't need anyone, no Murzas, no neighbors, because he has such power, such an envious consequence. Fire comes from his innards. If he wanted, he could burn down the whole settlement, or the whole town, all the woods around it, even the whole flat pancake of the earth. That must be why the bosses avoid him. They don't mess with him like they do with us, simple golubchiks. He has strength and glory and power on earth. Ay, 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 but we poor small folk have to stand on our porches at night, inhaling the freezing darkness, exhaling a slightly warmer darkness. We stomp our feet, turn our faces to the distant heavenly spindle, listen to tears tinkling like frozen peas, rolling into the thickets of our beards. We listen to the silence of the black isbas on Blackfoot hills, the creak of the high trees, to the whine of the blizzard, which brings in gusts, barely audible, but still clear, of a distant, pitiful, hungry northern wail.
Good evening, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody. Well, in my compressed 8 minutes or so, I will read something related to my experience in life. Well, my name is Saadi Youssef, but also I'm a lonely warrior in a way or another. We're roaming the world for half a century or so. And these 2 pages is about my experience. So have patience with me. Thank you. In this humid evening, a leaden Paris evening, on the 5th of January, 1992. I think of 40 years back when I published my first poetic text. I was then in the days of need, and I borrowed 10 dinars, that's about $30, from an uncle of mine to print a long poem in a booklet. I returned the sum to my uncle, not in one banknote or 2 as I received it, but in a sack of coins of varied marks and sounds. From the poem, I gained a great deal: a leather belt, and a seat in the movie theater. Well, today, I delight in the same sentiment. I gird myself, I take matters in my hand, and I reach for art. How was I destined? I, the child of an impoverished village and villagers, to reach out for art and to persist in doing so until this evening, until this moment. How was I destined to cross deserts and oceans and to exchange one country for other countries, the grandfather's home for semi-furnished apartments and cheap hotels, and my first library for stacks of books folded and unfolded like luggage? How was I destined to cross the bridge between the mosque of Hamdan village and the public road, that umbilical cord which is birth and death? How was I destined to bear the strain and the hardship, to endure them and to dialogue with them, even when the bones with me are feeble and my head is all aflame with holiness? The days rotate, the years turn into decades, and there are neither landmarks on the trail nor a beacon on the mountain top. The 7th of January, 1992, another Paris morning, rain and leaden sky. It is 8:30 and darkness is still total. Only the windows light the jet black morning in this working class suburb where I live. The roar of the cars and buses penetrates the double glass. People are going to their factories and business while my papers waiting remain blank. Well, why I am in Paris? Why am I here and there and here, in migration that started 35 years ago, well, now it's half a century really. Moscow, Damascus, Kuwait, Beirut, Algiers, Damascus, Beirut, Cyprus, Beirut, Damascus, Aden, Cyprus, Belgrade, Tunis, and at last Paris. After Paris, there are many countries. I can enumerate more and more. Really, I lost, all the trail back, my trail back, I lost it really. I can't retrace it back easily. Sometimes I dream about that trail, and I still lose some details of my long way. What am I doing in Paris? Really? It's really, that's right. Good. Yeah. What am I doing in Paris? Exile includes the idea of abrogation, abrogating the relationship of the individual with heaven, earth, and society. There is a vertical line connecting heaven, where the worship is, with earth, where the ancestors lie in the long repose of death. And there is a horizontal line ordering the village or the town where homes, memories, and childhood playgrounds are. At the point of intersection between those two lines stands the individual. The horror of exile is in the uprooting of the individual from this point of intersection and transplanting him in another spot, which is not a point of intersection, where neither heaven is the primordial one, nor the ancestors are ancestors, where there are no homes, no memories, and no childhood playgrounds. What remains, therefore? Hardship only, toil and pain in order to preserve the primordial composition, that stock that is threatened by extinction, and the root that is drying up. But the rules of the artistic process make such preservation an extremely laborious task. The more someone makes an advance in art's way, the more his need for deeper roots increases. Deeper roots at the point of intersection, not in the soil of exile. And thank you very much.
Hello, thank you so much. Such a delight to be here. I'm Kiran Desai, and I'm reading from The Inheritance of Loss. I'm going to try very hard to fit in my allotted time and not, become the stereotype of the Indian behind the microphone. So this requires a very little introduction. I'm going to read a little passage that got about a character called Biju from India, immigrant from India, working in a Chinese restaurant in New York. The restaurant is called Freddy's Walk, and he is their delivery boy. So here we go. Freddy's Walk. Szechuan wings and French fries, just $3. Fried rice, $1.35. $1 for pan-fried dumplings, fat and tight as babies. Slice them open and flood your plate with a run of luscious oil. In this country, poor people eat like kings. General Tso's chicken, empress pork, and Biju on his bicycle with the delivery bag on his handlebars, a tremulous figure between heaving buses, regurgitating taxis. What growls, what sounds of flatulence came from this traffic? Biju pounded at the pedals, heckled by taxi drivers direct from Punjab. A man is not a caged thing. A man is wild, wild. He must drive as such in a bucking, yodeling taxi. They harassed Biju with such blows from their horns as could split the world into whey and solids. One evening, Biju was sent to deliver hot and sour soups and egg foo young to 3 Indian girls, students, new addition to the neighborhood, in an apartment just opened under reviewed city laws to raise rents. Banners reading Anti-Gentrification Day had been hauled up over the street by the long-term residents for a festival earlier in the afternoon, where they played music, grilled hot dogs in the street, and sold all their gritty junk. One day, the Indian girls hoped to be gentry, but right now, despite being unwelcome in the neighborhood, they were in the student stage of vehemently siding with the poor people who wished them gone. The girl who answered the buzzer smiled, shiny teeth, shiny eyes through shiny glasses. She took the bag and went to collect the money. It was suffused with Indian femininity in there. Abundant amounts of sweet, newly washed hair. I drank too much before getting on stage. Gold-strung Kolhapuri slippers lying about. Heavyweight accounting books sat on the table along with the chunky Ganesh for interior decoration, plus luck in money and exams. Well, one of them continued with a conversation Biju had interrupted, discussing a 4th Indian girl not present. Why doesn't she just go for an Indian boy then who'll understand all the temper tantrum stuff? She won't look at an Indian boy. She doesn't want a nice Indian boy who's grown up chatting with his aunties in the kitchen. What does she want then? She wants the Marlboro man with a PhD. They had a self-righteousness common to many Indian women of the English-speaking upper-educated, went out to mimosa brunches, ate their nani's roti with adept fingers, donned a sari or smacked on elastic shorts for aerobics, could say, "Namaste kusam auntie, aaye bethe khaye," as easily as shit. They took to short hair quickly, were eager for a Western-style romance, and happy for a traditional ceremony with lots of jewelry. Green set meaning emeralds, red set meaning rubies, white set meaning diamonds. They consider themselves uniquely positioned to lecture everyone on a variety of topics. accounting professors on accounting, Vermonters on the fall foliage, Indians on America, Americans on India, Indians on India, Americans on America. They were poised, they were impressive. In the United States, where luckily it was still assumed that most Indian women were downtrodden, they were lauded as extraordinary, which had the unfortunate result of making them even more of what they already were. Dhanyawad, shukriya, thank you, extra tip, you should buy hat, muffler, gloves to be ready for the winter. The shiny-eyed girl said it in many ways, so that the meaning might be conveyed from every angle, that he might comprehend their friendliness completely in this meeting between Indians abroad of different classes and languages, rich, poor, north, south, top caste, bottom caste. But then, in a week, 5 people called up Freddie's Walk to complain. The food was cold, it had turned to winter. The shadows drew close, the night chomped more than its share of ours. Bijou smelled the first of the snow and found it had the same difficult smell that existed inside the freezer. On the Hudson, the ice cracked loudly into pieces, and within the contours of this gray, broken river, it seemed as if the city's inhabitants were being provided with a glimpse of something far and forlorn that they might use to consider their own loneliness. Bijou put a padding of newspapers down his shirt, and sometimes he took the scallion pancakes and inserted them below the paper, inspired by the memory of an uncle who used to go out to the fields in winter with his lunchtime rotis down his vest. But even this did not seem to help. And once on his bicycle, he began to weep from the cold, and the weeping unpicked a deeper vein of grief. Such a terrible groan issued from between the whimpers that he was shocked his sadness had such depth. When he returned home to the basement of a building at the bottom of Harlem, he fell straight into sleep. The building belonged to an invisible management company that listed its address as 1 1/4 Street and owned tenements all over the neighborhood. The superintendent supplementing his income by illegally renting out basement quarters by the week, by the month, and even by the day to fellow illegals. He spoke about as much English as Bijou did, so between Spanish, Hindi, and wild mime, Jacinto's gold tooth flashing in the late evening sun, they had settled the terms of rental. Bijou joined a shifting population of men camping out near the fuse box behind the boiler and the cubby holes and in odd-shaped corners that were once pantries, maids' rooms, laundry rooms, storage rooms, at the bottom of what had once been a single-family home. Bijou had been nervous there from his first day. "Howdy," a man on the steps of his new abode had said, holding out his hand and nodding. "My name's Joey, and I just had me some whiskey." This was a local homeless man at the edge of his hunting and gathering territory, which he sometimes marked by peeing a bright arc right across the road. He wintered here on a subway grate in a giant plastic bag igloo that sagged and then blew taut with stale air every time a train passed. "The food is cold," the customers of Freddie's Walk complained. "Soup arrived cold, again. The rice is cold each and every time." "I'm also cold," said Bijou, losing his temper. "Pedal faster," said the owner. "I cannot." It was a little after 1 a.m. when he left Freddie's Walk for the last time, trudged between snow mountains adorned with empty takeout containers and solidified dog pee in surprised yellow. The streets were empty, but for the homeless man who stood looking at an invisible watch on his wrist while talking into a dead payphone. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, take off, he shouted. And then he hung up the phone and ran, holding onto his hat as if it might get blown off by the rocket he had just launched into space. Bijou turned in mechanically at the 6th somber house with its tombstone facade, past the metal cans against which he could hear the unmistakable sound of rat claws, and went down the flight of steps to the basement. "I'm very tired," he said out loud. A man near him was frying in bed, turning this way, that way. Someone else was grinding his teeth. By the time he found employment again, at a bakery on Broadway in LaSalle, he had used up all the money in his savings envelope in his sock. It was spring, the ice was melting, the freed piss was flowing. All over, in city cafes and bistros, they took advantage of this delicate nutty sliver between the winter cold as hell and summer hot as hell, and dined al fresco on the narrow pavement under the cherry blossoms. Women in baby doll dresses, ribbons and bows that didn't coincide with their personalities indulged themselves the first fiddleheads of the season. And the fragrance of expensive cooking mingled with the eructation of taxis and the lascivious subway breath that went up the skirts of the spring-clad girls, making them wonder if this is how Marilyn Monroe felt. Somehow not, somehow not. The mayor found a rat in Gracie Mansion, and Bijou, newly employed at the Queen of Tarts bakery, met Said, who would become the man he admired most in the United States of America. "I am from Zanzibar, not Tanzania," he said, introducing himself. Bijou knew neither one nor the other. "Where is that?" he asked. "Don't you know? Zanzibar full of Indians, man. My grandmother, she is Indian." Thank you so much.
I'm going to read this poem in French. Joe, who is behind me, is not my bodyguard. He's going to read. So you will read the poem in English since I'm afraid of reading in English. So let's go in French. A poem I wrote to my mother. J'ai planté mon mât au cœur de ce territoire. Mais voici, loin des miens, j'apprends maintenant à danser d'un seul pied et à oublier ma tradition de bipède. La terre rouge de ma contrée n'a pas quitté mes semelles depuis la dernière transhumance. Le sommeil habite mes paupières, mais je dors d'un seul œil, d'une seule oreille. J'ai épousé le destin de la feuille. Je me détache de l'arbre et m'envole au gré du vent. Je retombe toujours au pied de l'arbre. Et même s'il m'est arrivé d'être emporté par le courant d'une rivière, dans chacun de mes songes revient ce nom, 2 syllabes, Congo. À présent, je ne résiste plus quand la douleur me convoque aux heures où l'insomnie hante les paupières. Je retrouve les ombres nocturnes de notre village et mon cœur bat au rythme d'un troupeau apeuré par une tornade imminente. Mais reste alors, pour arroser le sol aride du retour, ces larmes torrentielles qui débordent le lit de mes peines. Quand je rentrerai de mon pèlerinage, la porte de la demeure sera close. Quelques moutons brouteront la dernière herbe du village. Je prendrai le chemin du cimetière et je reverrai cette tombe toute seule près de l'arbre qui donna naissance à mes premiers poèmes. C'est là qu'elle repose, ma mère, et c'est là que j'habite depuis longtemps. Merci.
I'm Joel Canaro, and I have the honor of reading the English translation by John Keane of this beautiful poem by my new friend, Alain.
Thank you.
I have planted my flagpole in the heart of this territory. Here I am far away from the things that were mine. I am learning now to dance with only one foot and to forget my bipedal traditions. The red earth of my region has not left my soles after the last transhumance. Sleepiness lives on in my eyelids, but I am sleeping with just one eye open, with only one ear. I have embraced the leaf's destiny. I free myself from the tree and fly off into the wind's volition, yet I always fall again at the foot of the tree. And even if it's come to pass that I have been removed by a river's current in each of my dreams, this name returns, 2 syllables, Congo. These days I no longer resist when grief summons me at those hours when insomnia haunts my eyelids. I recall the nocturnal shadows of our village, and my heart beats to the rhythms of a herd of cattle frightened by an imminent tornado. What then remains for me to water the arid soil of return? These torrential tears which overflow the bed of my sorrows. When I return from my pilgrimage, the door of the dwelling will be closed. A few sheep will graze on the last grass in the vicinity. I will take the cemetery road, and I will see the tomb again, all alone near the tree which gave birth to my very first poems. It is there that she rests, my mother, and it is there that I have lived for a very long time. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Neil Gaiman, and I want to read one piece of prose and one poem. And the prose is from the postscript to a novel called American Gods. Reykjavik in Iceland is a strange city, even for those who have seen many strange cities. It is a volcanic city. The heat from the city comes from deep underground. There are tourists, but not as many of them as you might expect, not even in early July. The sun was shining, as it has shone for weeks now. It ceased shining for an hour or two in the small hours. There would be a dusky dawn of sorts between 2 and 3 in the morning, and then the day would begin once more. The big tourist had walked most of Reykjavik that morning, listening to people talk in a language that had changed little in 1,000 years. The natives here could read the ancient sagas as easily as they could read a newspaper. There was a sense of continuity on this island that scared him and that he found desperately reassuring. He was very tired. The unending daylight had made sleep almost impossible, and he'd sat in his hotel room through the whole long nightless night, alternately reading a guidebook and Bleak House, a novel he'd bought in an airport in the last few weeks, but which airport he could no longer remember. Sometimes he had stared out of the window. Finally, the clock, as well as the sun, proclaimed it morning. He bought a bar of chocolate at one of the many candy stores and walked the sidewalk, occasionally finding himself reminded of the volcanic nature of Iceland. He would turn a corner and notice for a moment a sulphurous quality to the air. It put him in mind not of Hades, but of rotten eggs. Shadow smiled at the pretty women because they made him feel pleasantly male, and he smiled at the other women too because he was having a good time. He was not sure when he became aware that he was being observed. Somewhere on his walk through Reykjavik, he became certain that someone was watching him. He would turn from time to time, trying to get a glimpse of who it was, and he would stare into store windows and out at the reflected street behind him, but he saw no one out of the ordinary, no one who seemed to be observing him. He went into a small restaurant where he ate smoked puffin and cloudberries and Arctic char and boiled potatoes, and he drank Coca-Cola, which tasted sweeter, more sugary than he remembered it tasting back in the States. When the waiter brought his bill, he said, "Excuse me, you are American?" "Yes." "Then happy 4th of July," said the waiter. He looked pleased with himself. Shadow had not realized that it was the 4th, Independence Day. Yes, he liked the idea of independence. He left the money and a tip on the table and walked outside. There was a cool breeze coming in off the Atlantic, and he buttoned up his coat. He sat down on a grassy bank and looked at the city that surrounded him and thought one day he would have to go home. And one day he would have to make a home to go back to. He wondered whether a home was a thing that happened to a place after a while, or if it was something that you found in the end, if you simply walked and waited and willed it long enough. Thank you. And this is what to do if you find yourself in a fairy tale. And it's called Instructions. Touch the wooden gate in the wall you never saw before. Say please before you open the latch. Go through. Walk down the path. A red metal imp hangs from the green-painted front door as a knocker. Do not touch it, it will bite your fingers. Walk through the house. Take nothing, eat nothing. However, if any creature tells you that it hungers, feed it. If it tells you that it is dirty, clean it. If it cries to you that it hurts, if you can, ease its pain. From the back garden, you will be able to see the wild wood. The deep well you walk past leads down to winter's realm. There is another land at the bottom of it. If you turn around here, you can walk back safely. You will lose no face. I will think no less of you. Once through the garden, you will be in the wood. The trees are old. Eyes peer from the undergrowth. Beneath a twisted oak sits an old woman. She may ask for something. Give it to her. She will point the way to a castle. Inside it are 3 princesses. Do not trust the youngest. Walk on. In the clearing beyond the castle, the 12-months sit about a fire, warming their feet, exchanging tales. They may do favors for you if you are polite. You may pick strawberries in December's frost. Trust the wolves, but do not tell them where you are going. The river can be crossed by the ferry. The ferryman will take you. The answer to his question is this: if he hands the oar to his passenger, he will be free to leave the boat. Only tell him this from a safe distance. If an eagle gives you a feather, keep it safe. Remember that giants sleep too soundly, that witches are often betrayed by their appetites. Dragons have one soft spot somewhere always. Hearts can be well hidden, and you betray them with your tongue. Do not be jealous of your sister. Know that diamonds and roses are as uncomfortable when they tumble from one's lips as toads and frogs. Colder too and sharper, and they cut. Remember your name. Do not lose hope. What you seek will be found. Trust ghosts. Trust those that you have helped to help you in their turn. Trust dreams. Trust your heart, and trust your story. When you come back, return the way you came. Favors will be returned, debts be repaid. Do not forget your manners. Do not look back. Ride the wise eagle. You shall not fall. Ride the silver fish. You will not drown. Ride the grey wolf. Hold tightly to his fur. There is a worm at the heart of the tower. That is why it will not stand. When you reach the little house, the place your journey started, you will recognize it, although it will seem much smaller than you remember. Walk up the path, and through the garden gate you never saw before but once, and then go home, or make a home. or rest. Thank you.
There's a vast community in the world that isn't a community, that has no place. I'm talking about the hundreds of thousands, the millions of refugees from the wars, the conflicts that are going on everywhere, and also the economic, so-called economic refugees fleeing from poverty and the loss of their means of livelihood. This, of course, is very prevalent in the continent that I come from Africa. And during the 14 years in Mozambique of war, during the war against the colonial power, the Portuguese, there were many thousands of people who came from Mozambique to get into South Africa. They had to walk through the Kruger Park, crawl under an electrified fence to find some form of refuge from their suffering. I'm going to read some excerpts from a story of mine, which is called The Ultimate Safari. Now, forget about me, the old woman. It is related, it's being narrated by an 11-year-old girl. That night, our mother went to the shop, and she didn't come back, ever. What happened? I don't know. My father also had gone away one day and never come back, but he was fighting in the war. We were in the war too, but we were children. We were like our grandmother and grandfather. We didn't have guns. The people my father was fighting, the bandits, they're called by our government, ran all over the place, and we ran away from them like chickens chased by dogs. Our mother went to the shop because someone said you could get some oil for cooking. And we were happy because we hadn't tasted oil for a long time. Perhaps she met the bandits. Twice they came to our village, and we ran and hid in the bush, and when they'd gone, we came back and found that they'd taken everything. We were waiting there for my mother. That night, she never came back. We stayed there all day, waiting for her. I don't know what day it was. There was no school, no church anymore in our village, so you didn't know whether it was Sunday or Monday. When the sun was going down, our grandmother and grandfather came. Our grandmother took us, me, the baby, my firstborn brother, our grandfather, back to her house, and we were all afraid. We were afraid of meeting the bandits on the way. We waited a long time at our grandmother's place. Our mother never came. So they decided, well, our grandmother did. Our grandfather, he made little noises and rocked from side to side. We would go away. We children were pleased. We wanted to go where there were no bandits and there was food. We were glad to think that there must be some such place away. To get there, we didn't know what to do. We met other people who were also going away, and we joined them because they seemed to know where that was better than we did. To get there, we had to go through the Kruger Park. We knew about the Kruger Park, a kind of whole country of animals, elephants, lions, jackals, hyenas, hippos, crocodiles. So we started to go away again. A man led us into the Kruger Park. "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" I kept asking. "Not yet," the man said. He told us we had to take a long way round to get round the fence, which would kill you. It would roast off your skin the moment you touched it, like the wire high up on poles that give light, electric light in our towns. When I asked the next time, he said we'd been walking in the Kruger Park for an hour. But it looked just like the bush we'd been walking through all day, and we hadn't seen any animals except the monkeys and birds which live around us at home, and a tortoise that, of course, couldn't get away from us. My firstborn brother and the other boys brought it to the man so that it could be killed and we could cook and eat it. He let it go because he told us we couldn't make a fire. All the time we were in the park, we must not make a fire because the smoke would show we were there. He said we must move like animals among the animals, away from the white people's camps. The buck ran away from us. They jumped so high, they seemed to fly. We followed the animals where they drank. When they had gone, we went to their water holes. But the animals ate, they ate all the time. Whenever you saw them, they were eating grass, trees, roots, and there was nothing for us. When it was very hot during the day, we would find lions lying asleep. They were the color of the grass, and we didn't see them at first, but the man did, and he led us back and a long way round where they slept. I wanted to lie down like the lions. We were tired, so tired. My firstborn brother and the man had to lift our grandfather from stone to stone where we found places to cross the rivers. We had to keep up. The man who led us was always telling us, we must catch up, but we asked him to wait for our grandfather. So everyone waited for our grandfather to catch up, but he didn't. It was the middle of the day. Insects were singing in our ears, and we couldn't hear him moving through the grass. We couldn't see him because the grass was so high and he was so small. We all went to look for him. We called him softly, but the noise of the insects must have filled the little space left for hearing in his ears. We looked and looked and looked, but we couldn't find him. We stayed in that long grass all night. In the afternoon, the man who led us came to our grandmother and told her the other people must move on. He said, if their children don't eat soon, they will die. Our grandmother looked at us, me, my firstborn brother, and my little brother on our lap. She got up with her feet apart, the way she puts them when she's going to lift firewood at home in our village. She swung my little brother onto her back and tied him in her cloth. She said, come. So we left the place with the long grass, left behind. There's a very big tent, bigger than a church or a school, tied down to the ground. I didn't understand. That was what it would be when we got there, away. We live in it with other people who've come from our country. Sister from the clinic says we're 200 without counting the babies, and we have new babies. Some were born on the way through the Kruger Park. The people in the village have let us join their school. I was surprised to find that they speak our language. Our grandmother told me that's why they allow us to stay on their land. Long ago, in the time of our grandfathers, there was no fence that kills you. There was no Kruger Park between them and us. We were the same people under our own king. Right from our village we left to this place that we've come to. Some white people came to take photographs of our people living in the tent. They said that they were making a film. I've never seen what that is, though I know about it. A white woman squeezed into our space and asked our grandmother questions. which were told to us in our language by someone who understands the white woman's. How long have you been living like this? She means here, our grandmother said, in this tent, 2 years and 1 month. And what do you hope for the future? Nothing. I'm here. But for your children, I want them to learn so they can get good jobs and money. Do you hope to go back to Mozambique, to your own country? I will not go back. But when the war's over, you won't be allowed to stay here. Don't you want to go home? I didn't think our grandmother wanted to speak again. I didn't think she was going to answer the white woman. The white woman put her head on one side and smiled at us. Our grandmother looked away from her and spoke. There is nothing, no home. Why does our grandmother say that? Why? I'll go back. I'll go back through that Kruger Park. After the war, when there are no bandits anymore, our mother may be waiting for us. And maybe when we left our grandfather, he was only left behind. He found his way somehow, slowly, through that Kruger Park, and he'll be there. They'll be home, and I'll remember them.
The ground beneath our feet. My father, the digger, could have told you a thing or two about the unsolidity of solid ground. The tunnels of pipe and cable, the sunken graveyards, the layered uncertainty of the past, the gaps in the earth through which our history seeps and is at once lost and retained in metamorphosed form, the underworlds at which we dare not guess. We find ground on which to make our stand. In India, that place obsessed by place, belonging to your place, knowing your place, we are mostly given that territory. And that's that, no arguments, get on with it. But Ormus and Vina and I, we couldn't accept that. We came loose. Among the great struggles of man, good, evil, reason, unreason, etc., there is also this mighty conflict between the fantasy of home and the fantasy of away, the dream of roots and the mirage of the journey. And if you are Ormus Kama, if you are Vina Apsara, whose songs could cross all frontiers, even the frontiers of people's hearts, then perhaps you believed all ground could be skipped over, all frontiers would crumble before the sorcery of the tune. Off you'd go, off your turf, beyond family and clan and nation and race, flying untouchably over the minefields of taboo until you stood at last at the last gateway, the most forbidden of all doors, where your blood sings in your ears. Don't even think about it. And you think about it. You cross that final frontier, and perhaps, we'll see how the tale works out. You have finally gone too far and are destroyed. At the frontier of the skin, they made a song about it, as they did about everything. You remember it. You remember the nasal elongation of his phrasing, and above and behind him, the high purity of her words. You remember his words, her words. If you remember the music, the words are impossible to forget. At the frontier of the skin, no dogs patrol. That was it. At the frontier of the skin, where I end and you begin, where I cross from sin to sin, abandon hope and enter in and lose my soul. At the frontier of the skin, no guards patrol. Yeah, but there was a second verse. At the frontier of the skin, mad dogs patrol. At the frontier of the skin, where they kill to keep you in, where you must not slip your skin or change your role. You can't pass out, I can't pass in. You must end as you begin or lose your soul. At the frontier of the skin, armed guards patrol. Vina Apsara, the beautiful, the dead. her very name too good for this world, Veena, the Indian lyre, Apsara from Apsaras, a swan-like water nymph, in Western terms, a naiad, not a dryad. Look out, Veena, nymph, watch your step, beware the ground beneath your feet. For a long while, I believed that in every generation, there are a few souls, call them lucky or cursed, who are simply born not belonging, who come into the world semi-detached, if you like, without strong affiliation to family or location or nation or race. That there may even be millions, billions of such souls, as many non-belongers as belongers, perhaps. That in some, the phenomenon may be as natural a manifestation of human nature as its opposite, but one that has been mostly frustrated throughout human history by lack of opportunity. And not only by that, for those who value stability, who fear transience, uncertainty, change, have erected a powerful system of stigmas and taboos against rootlessness, that disruptive antisocial force, so that we mostly conform. We pretend to be motivated by loyalties and solidarities we do not really feel. We hide our secret identities beneath the false skins of those identities which bear the belonger's seal of approval. But the truth leaks out in our dreams. Alone in our beds, because we are all alone at night, even if we do not sleep by ourselves. We soar, we fly, we flee. And in the waking dreams our societies permit, in our myths, our arts, our songs, we celebrate the non-belongers, the different ones, the outlaws, the freaks. What we forbid ourselves, we pay good money to watch in a playhouse or movie theater, or to read about between the secret covers of a book. Our libraries, our palaces of entertainment tell the truth. The tramp, the assassin, the rebel, the thief, the mutant, the outcast, the delinquent, the devil, the sinner, the traveler, the gangster, the runner, the mask. If we did not recognize in them our least fulfilled needs, we would not invent them over and over again, in every place, in every language, in every time. No sooner did we have ships than we rushed to sea, sailing across oceans in paper boats. No sooner did we have cars than we hit the road. No sooner did we have airplanes than we zoomed to the furthest corners of the globe. Now we yearn for the moon's dark side, the rocky plains of Mars, the rings of Saturn, the interstellar deeps. We send mechanical photographers into orbit or on one-way journeys to the stars, and we weep at the wonders they transmit. We are humbled by the mighty images of far-off galaxies standing like cloud pillars in the sky, and we give names to alien rocks as if they were our pets. We hunger for warp space, for the outlying rim of time. And this is the species that kids itself it likes to stay at home. To bind itself with, what are they called again? Ties. That's my view. You don't have to buy it. Maybe there aren't so many of us after all. Maybe we are disruptive and antisocial and we shouldn't be allowed. You're entitled to your opinion. All I will say is, sleep soundly, baby. Sleep tight and sweet dreams. A little more. Disorientation is loss of the East. Ask any navigator, the East is what you sail by. Lose the East, and you lose your bearings, your certainties, your knowledge of what is and what may be, perhaps even your life. Where was that star you followed to that manger? That's right. The East orients. That's the official version. The language says so, and you should never argue with the language. But let's just suppose. What if the whole deal, orientation, knowing where you are, and so on, what if it's all a scam? What if all of it, home, kinship, the whole enchilada, is just the biggest, most truly global and centuries oldest piece of brainwashing. Suppose that it's only when you dare to let go that your real life begins. When you're whirling free of the mothership, when you cut your ropes, slip your chain, step off the map, go absent without leave, scram, vamoose, whatever, suppose that it's then and only then that you're actually free to act, to lead the life nobody tells you how to live, or when, or why, in which nobody orders you to go forth and die for them, or for God, or comes to get you because you broke one of the rules, or because you're one of those people who are, for reasons which unfortunately you can't be given, simply not allowed. Suppose you've got to go through the feeling of being lost into the chaos and beyond. You've got to accept the loneliness, the wild panic of losing your moorings, the vertiginous terror of the horizon spinning round and round like the edge of a coin tossed in the air. You won't do it. Most of you won't do it. The world's head laundry is pretty good at washing brains. Don't jump off that cliff, don't walk through that door, don't step into that waterfall, don't take that chance, don't step across that line, don't ruffle my sensitivities. I'm warning you now, don't make me mad. You're doing it, you're making me mad. You won't have a chance, you haven't got a prayer, you're finished, you're history, you're less than nothing, you're dead to me, dead to your whole family, your nation, your race, everything you ought to love more than life and listen to like your master's voice and follow blindly and bow down before and worship and obey. You're dead, you hear me? Forget about it, you stupid bastard, I don't even know your name. But just imagine you did it. You stepped off the edge of the earth, or through the fatal waterfall, and there it was, the magic valley at the end of the universe, the blessed kingdom of the air. Great music everywhere. You breathe the music in and out. It's your element now. It feels better than belonging in your lungs. Veena was the first one of us to do it, almost jumped second, and I, as usual, brought up the rear. And we can argue all night about why, did we jump or were we pushed? But you can't deny we all did it. We three kings of disorient were. And I'm the only one who lived to tell the tale. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carol Llewellyn and I'm not a reader. You'll be happy to hear that I would never dream to try and beat that. It's my great privilege. I'm the festival director, the Penn World Voices Festival director. Thank you very much. And it's my absolute honor to be here tonight to say thank you very much to all of our readers, to Steve Martin, to Pia Tafdrup, to Don DeLillo, to Tatyana Tolstaya, to Saadi Youssef, to Kiran Desai, to Alain Mabanckou, Neil Gaiman, Nadine Gordimer, and Salman Rushdie. But I would also like to thank the incredible staff of Penn who have made this festival what it is. It started 3 years ago and it is going from strength to strength. I'd like to thank all the Penn members, the volunteers, and the many dedicated corporate, cultural, and individual sponsors for their indispensable support. And I'd like to thank you, the audience, for coming out tonight, and I hope for the rest of the week. As Salman said, we have another 60 or so events, and many of the writers that you've seen tonight will be talking at more length about their work, and I hope that you will come and join us at some of these events. But particularly because tonight's and all the other sessions that we've had last night, we had 700 people to Cooper Union Hall, which shows that Penn World Voices is indeed a festival you want to support and to see thrive. In an era of growing linguistic and cultural isolation, the festival celebrates and promotes free expression and international literary fellowship. It's a week in which people from all over the world can come together to enjoy the mix of language and cultures found in New York City, as well as our connections to nations around the globe. And above all, I'd like to thank the 162 writers participating in this year's festival for their work, for their vision, and for the joy they bring to us as readers. And on that note, I'd just like to encourage you to take home the books of the writers that you've seen tonight. They will be signing their books upstairs. You've had the wonderful privilege of hearing the lilt and the cadence of their work, and I think when you take their books home and read them, those words will stay with you. Thank you so much, and I hope we'll see you again.